You know, I've received so many rat's nest containing amps lately that I started opening the boxes out in the driveway. But then I caught some heat because I wasn't letting Jack do his traditional sniff test on each incoming box. So today we'll get back to our normal procedure. We'll give Jack a chance to sniff around and give us the rat's nest indication if there is one. I'm not getting that from him, so we're going to go ahead and open up this jewel and see what's inside. I can tell you this is a customer item that's here for repairs. It's from a fellow named John in Cypress, California. Okay, it looks like it's beautifully packaged. So let's dig in and see what he sent us to be fixed. I can tell you from the box that this was actually packed by FedEx, and they did a beautiful job. Contrast this with the box that was packed by UPS that I showed you a couple of videos ago. Okay, really nice job. I find it interesting that although Jack is right in the box checking this out, Casey just finds this all very, very beneath her dignity. Sorry, Casey. We'll get you some treats. They are never beneath your dignity. Well, lo and behold, look what we have here, an absolutely mint Tel-Ray Super Organ Tone. Viewers will recall that a really beat up version of one of these was the subject of one of our most popular videos ever. So it looks like a viewer has sent one in for repairs so that we can bring it up to its optimum performing standards. Let's hope we're able to. That first one was a real handful. I have a feeling this one's going to be a whole lot easier to work on because of the beautiful condition. Okay, so let's take it out to the workshop and get started. First, though, we have to check with Jack. Jack, is this acceptable? And I believe it is. We'll look over here at Casey, and Casey really doesn't care one way or the other. Okay, Jack, we're going with your opinion on this, and we're taking it to the workshop. Good boy. We've got this gem out in the workshop. Let's take a quick look at the exterior so you can see what a nice one's supposed to look like. If you remember the one I worked on earlier, it was a real mess, but this is just a picture book example of what they're supposed to look like. Let's look here. We got our corner protectors at the rear. We got the place to wrap the cord, which I had to build from scratch. Got a nice tag on it here, Tel-Ray Electronics, with a serial number. I don't know if that's an auction tag or a storage tag or what that would be. Stamped on here, 115 volt, 60 cycle, and what's that, 55 watts. Okay. Remember, mine didn't have a back door, as I recall, sure didn't have the handle. But anyway, it's a real sweetie. While we're looking at this magnificent electromechanical device, I wanted to say that the one other electromechanical device of which I hold in high reverence and would love the chance to work on is one of the original Diarmond tremolos. I built a couple from scratch, but I've never had a chance to even see one in person. So any viewers out there, if you've got pieces of one that you'd like to contribute, or you've got one that doesn't work and you'd like it fixed, I would dearly love the opportunity to repair it for you, or to take the pieces that you contribute and turn it into a functional Diarmond tremolo. So please dig around back in your storerooms and see if you might not have the perfect basis for a future video. I'd sure appreciate it. So now let's get started disassembling this beast to see what we can do to make it work better. Okay, I've unwrapped the original 2-wire power cord. It's almost a shame to change this, but it really probably would benefit from a 3-wire cord. Also, I noticed while preparing to remove the back door that 2 of the original Phillips head screws are missing. I'll have to dig through my antique Phillips head screw stash and see if I can't turn up a couple that'll match these. Okay, let's remove the back door and see what lurks within. Good grief, this thing is absolutely pristine. I guess things like this exist in the world. I rarely ever get a chance to see them when they're in this beautiful shape. Generally, by the time I get them, they've been dragged behind a dump truck and stomped on by Whoopi Goldberg or something. So this ought to be a real honor and learning experience to check out exactly the way one of these comes from the maker instead of from the landfill. Okay, so let's continue our disassembly and check it out up close and personal. I'm removing the 3 number 6 bolts from the bottom of the cabinet, and I was just admiring the great condition here of the original rubber feet and the Tolex on the bottom of the cabinet. Gosh, what an absolute gem. I really get excited, as you can tell, by things that are in just pristine condition like this. All right, 4 of those identical Phillips head screws removed from the front panel, and now it's time to pull it out of the cabinet. All right, we've got the drone's eye view here of the power transformer that will provide the different AC voltages for what amounts to a recording preamp here. We're going to have 112 AX7 that will boost the signal for recording, and then 112 AX7 to recover the signal from the spinning disc. Great big can capacitor. You see that the labeling stamps are still in good shape on the chassis surface. Let's have a brief review of the controls on the Super Organ Tone. Over on the left we have the master on-off switch and high-level volume control. Now the unit is prone to distortion if you overdrive it. So if you plug a high-level input into this jack, this allows you to attenuate that input a bit so that you don't overdrive the unit and get unwanted distortion. Of course, down here you'll plug in your input from the guitar or the signal generator. Over here is the output to the amplifier, and then there's a pedal which you can turn the whole unit on and off as you want to use it with the instrument. And over here we have a bass and treble response slide switch. I can tell you, just like a reverb, the unit has a lot easier time handling treble input signals than it does bass. So you can switch here and you'll get sort of a cleaner output with the treble setting and a kind of a fuller, deeper output with the bass setting. Now, right above that slide switch is the organ tone level. Now, this controls the amount of wet output signal. In other words, the signal that has been through the tank and has all of the delay and echo effects impressed upon it. Okay, I kind of like this set at about 75%. And back here we have the dry signal output. And I find that its setting is probably best at about 50% straight up. You may differ in what you prefer, but I find this mixture of dry and wet signal to be about right, really rich and loaded with the organ tone effect. Now there are 3 heads in the tank. This one is the reed head. These 2 are the right heads. This pot right here controls the strength of the writing signal that is applied to the disc. Now as the disc is spinning, the signal will be imprinted on the disc by both of these right heads, and then as the signal spins around, it will be read here. So this one will be read first, then this one will be read second. So we have like a double echo as the wheel is turning and feeding the written signals to the read head. I'm not sure what the M or W implies, other than maybe somebody at some time opened the can and cleaned it and replaced the oil. I doubt it. Now let's see, we'll look here at the motor unit and the drive wheel with all sorts of writing on it from 1968, which may have been the last time this thing was opened and worked on. You see here we've got that wobble inducer still present. It gives us that sort of, I don't know, sort of a tremolo effect to the organ tone. Also down here, there's some kind of a red glue that's been applied. And when you see stuff like this, it makes you think it's that the factory did it so they can detect if anybody has disassembled the unit or worked on it. I guess that would void your warranty if these things actually had one. Anyway, that'll have to be cleaned away because it's gonna get removed. Okay, so that stuff is history. All right, enough observing the top of the chassis. Let's look inside real quick and then get started on our disassembly. You can see that the AC is supplied to the preamplifier unit, and then a cord comes from that unit over here to run the motor. That'll have to be disconnected, of course, before the chassis can be separated from the board and the motor. And they put on some of these little twist-on connectors here to help, to assist in that. But there's still wires that are going to run from the preamp unit around here to the motor unit. So I'm going to have to make up a little diagram here and show where each of those wires was connected and mark them so that I can be sure that I get them back exactly as they were before I took it apart. Okay, those twisty connectors have been removed, and now the motor AC input is separated from the preamp AC output, and the pilot light is separated. These were 3 wires for each of the twisties. Okay, so that's step 1 in releasing the motor unit from the preamp. All right, I'm removing those screws from the baseboard here that hold the motor in place, and you can see the little ring of sealant, and I'm sure there'll be a little ring of it around this one too. And like I said, it may have been some kind of security measure, but those days are long gone. What would that be, like 60 years ago? Okay, so I think the warranty's probably expired by now. All right, the 2 signal wires now have been removed from the motor unit, and I have a completely confusing and indecipherable diagram which will confuse any onlookers, including myself, when it comes time to put this back together. All right, now let's start taking the can apart to see what is going on inside. All right, I used a screwdriver around here very gently, slightly lifting at close intervals until I finally got the can lid loose. Be sure you don't deform this perimeter ring, or it may not seal properly, and then the oil is going to leak out all over everything. Well, the contents are beautiful, bright and shiny, but there's almost no oil in this. Now, I know you're not supposed to use much, but there's a cup, maybe a cc or so, of very murky looking oil. So that is going to be an issue. It has to be cleaned, and then the proper Yukon oil right from the Yukon and Alaska has to be used here, and in an amount that nobody can really decide on. You're supposed to sort of guess and hope it works, and if it doesn't, then you put in a different amount. It's one of those situations. I guessed right on the first one. Maybe I'll guess right on this one too. Okay, so let's get to cleaning out the contents of this jewel. Might not even have to disassemble it. Maybe I can get in here and clean the disc and the can externally. We'll see. Okay, now let's look at that irreplaceable anodized disc. I'm going to spin it, and what we're looking for is radial scratches, and there are none. Okay, the disc appears to be in perfect shape. I'm rotating it here as we're looking at it, and I can find not a single flaw in the disc, which is the most critical element in this unit. Now, since the can is shiny and immaculate inside, I have eliminated all of the murky oil, cleaned all of the surfaces, and checked the disc. Everything is in absolutely mint condition in here, and so there's no reason in my mind to further disassemble this. I think you'd be crazy to do it. Okay, you can only cause harm when things are perfect to begin with. So not wanting to cause harm, I'm just going to leave it like this, put in what I think is the correct measure of oil, seal it, and then after we've checked out the electronics and all, maybe replaced a filter cap or two, then test the unit pretty much as is, but with fresh oil and the proper amount. Now, as to the correct amount of oil for the can, I usually put in about 1.5 teaspoonfuls. It doesn't sound like much, but if you notice that the entire disc unit is way off center and the disc itself comes very close to the bottom of the can. So you can get by with just a shallow bit of oil down here so that the rim of the disc, as it travels downward, down to the bottom there, picks up the oil, brings it up, and it is distributed. It kind of drools down the surface of the disc, but it comes down and lubricates the record heads, and the entire disc surface has a thin layer of oil. We don't want it immersed in oil. We don't want this to be like an aquarium full of oil, but just that small amount, from my brief experience with these, generally is the right amount. Okay, so we'll see how this works. Now, when fitting the lid back onto the can, nothing works better than a great big sledgehammer. Okay, and it's best if you swing just as hard as you can. Okay, enough hilarity. No, what I do is I use a C-clamp to put the lid back on. Let me show you how that works. I'm using a thin piece of wood to sort of shield the cap and distribute the pressure. I tighten down with a C-clamp, and I'm going to come up here, over here, and around. Now, you can't really tighten very well at the bottom, but I think you'll find that by tightening as far as you can with the C-clamp, the bottom will comply. Then, after the lid has been very uniformly and completely reinstalled in the can, we'll set it down on a piece of clean white, in this case napkin, lid down to see if there's any oil leaks. You'll immediately be able to spot them and know where they're coming from. With the napkin, it'll be discolored by the oil. Okay, we'll leave it here for like 5 or 10 minutes and see if we need to tighten the lid any more. It's better to find it out this way than the hard way. Okay, about 15 minutes have passed. Let's pick it up and see what we got. I don't see any leaks. So I think we're okay. Now it's time to take a gander at the electronics within the chassis, do a little testing of components. Okay, let's get in here with our volt-ohmmeter and do some quick testing on, especially on the capacitors and maybe any resistors that look like they're overheated. Also, we'll use the ESR meter on the electrolytics to see what kind of shape they're in. Well, after careful checking, all of the components in the chassis circuit checked out perfectly. I installed a 3-wire power cord just for safety's sake to ensure that no electrical shock hazard could pass down the shield of the instrument cable and energize the strings or metal parts of a guitar. Well, it looks like the postman brought us a nice little box of gifts from Josh Hufford. First off, there's a pretty snazzy looking distortion meter. I have no idea what you would connect it to, but maybe we can figure that out. And as Jack is busily sniffing away, there's also a motor of the type that I used to use when I was restoring jukeboxes. that would turn those color cylinders that are back illuminated. So this would be a good spare for some of my jukeboxes. So thanks, Josh. I really appreciate it. You're giving Jack's little snout a good work over here with all the sniffing, and we'll see what we can do with these jewels. Thank you. All right, let me show you the setup I've got here. It's the same as I used with my previous Super Organ Tone in an earlier video. Got the signal generator here sending around a 200 cycle per second tone into the instrument input. I'm going to turn it on here in just a minute, and we'll start the disc spinning and turn on the preamp section. And then I'm outputting here to a little Fender bullet amp so that we'll get to hear the effect. Now, I talked with the owner of the unit, and his main complaint is he said there was a popping, clicking sound that occurred rapidly at about the same speed as the disc spins. So let's see if that's still happening. Remember, I have cleaned out the tank here, put in fresh oil. Let's see if that helped. Now I think you'll be able to hear that? So like a static reoccurring sound, about the same frequency as the spinning disc, but it seems to respond to physical twisting and movement here of the can unit. There it is. Now it's stopped. Apparently there's some misalignment or something in here that's causing this problem. Let's take a real close look and see if we can figure out what it is. Getting some wonderful organ tone effects here. Really nice reverberation, but listen to that tick 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 in the background. Not acceptable. All right. Now if I twist this, it stops. Let go and it comes back with a vengeance. So let's take a close look at that can. There must be something in here that is colliding. Maybe the disc is hitting the bottom of the can. Let's take a look. Alright, I removed the oil tank unit, and I was hoping as I spin this by hand I could feel some sort of interference, or like the disc is bumping into something, but I don't feel anything like that. Also, there's a spring at the end over here that pushes the rod to the right hand side, and as you see, as I move it back to the left, it pops back, so that seems to be okay. If I push in, I just don't feel anything here. I guess I'll have to open the can again and take a look inside. Since the screw heads that are holding the can to this wall here of the motor chamber are inside the can and under the disc, the nightmare from hell with these is to get access to what's inside the can, you have to find a way to separate the inner lid here from the can, and that's not easy to do. If you just try prying the can against the metal surface here, you're just going to bend the lid. So this is going to take a little time, but when I come back, this will be separated, and then we can see into the discs and heads in the unit. Okay, and I can't emphasize enough how little fun it is to try to pry this can off of this lid. But anyway, it's off, and now we can see into the disc unit. There's the anodized disc and the three reed right heads. If you look down here at this head, I see daylight about halfway between it and the disc, and that can't be good. I'm beginning to think, and look at this one here, it barely touches the disc just with its tip. I think maybe these heads need to be adjusted downward so they make better contact with the disc. I cleaned the area between one of those neoprene heads and the disc, And look at the disintegrated rubber that has accumulated. That can't be helping contact. Okay, I still think, as you look here at the daylight under that head between it and the disc, that they are not adjusted right. I don't think they're making enough contact. So after cleaning them and the disc surface, I'm going to adjust them downward. If you look in here, they're adjusted about as high as they can go. See that? There's maybe, what, a half a thread adjustment downward. So I'm going to unscrew these two lock nuts, crank this down a little bit, and bring this down probably a couple threads so that when I spin it, I get a good uniform sweep from all three heads for their full width. Okay, using a 1/4 inch wrench, and none of this is fun, you first loosen the lock nut on top and run it up toward the end of the Allen stud here, and then using the same wrench, you'll loosen this nut and run it up a little bit, getting some space between that nut and the head, which will push the head downward onto the disc. Also, if you look closely at this, it looks like a sliver of that neoprene head is missing. Now, I don't know if that was trimmed like at the factory. See if we can get a decent image here. Or I don't see any reason why it would wear that way. Also, the other one's just the same. What are the odds that two of them would be flawed exactly the same unless it was intentional? Okay, while I have this one out, I'm going to clean it thoroughly and then put it in with these lock nuts and adjust it properly so it has a nice full contact with the disc. Another consideration when assembling the neoprene heads is that the trailing edge has to coincide exactly with like an invisible spoke from the center of the wheel to the rim. You don't want it at an angle. You want it to be where this is exactly perpendicular to the rim of the disc. Okay, I hope that's clear. I'm reinstalling the heads, and remember that this nut and this nut were almost touching before. Now we have a good 2-thread distance here, which has pushed the neoprene head down 2 threads closer and tighter to the disc surface. Alright, here's the final disc adjustment. You can see we have about 2 threads showing here, maybe a little over as opposed to less than 1 in the beginning, and no daylight showing between the neoprene and the disc surface, okay, on any of the heads. So I think they're adjusted. Before I reassemble this to test it, though, I'm going to go back and make sure that my trailing edges are going straight into the center, and tighten up these adjusters while I still can. Okay, no pun intended. And then I'll just put it all together. Okay, I just discovered something so outrageously wrong that I can't believe it. And it makes me think this has been worked on before, and that it was maybe by that M or W that's on the can. And believe it or not, I think the heads are in 180 degrees backwards. Now look at how the slope is of the rubber. Wouldn't that make you think the disc then, if you look at the end, is going to be going counterclockwise, so that it's not coming head on to the rubber, but slipping beneath it? Wouldn't that make sense? Let me plug this in and watch which way it turns. Okay, we're thinking clockwise on this end, right? Because it's counterclockwise on the other. Watch. Counterclockwise. Look what's happening. The disc is coming into the ends of the neoprene heads, not going beneath. This can't be right. I'm going to reverse them 180 degrees. I'm convinced that that makes no sense. And I'm going to do it the way I think it should be, and let's see if that doesn't help. Okay, I've rotated all of the heads 180 degrees so that they are leaning away from the direction of rotation instead of wedging into it. I'm wondering if that going into the direction of rotation didn't make them hop a little bit, and maybe that's what was making the static. As it is now, they're going with the direction of rotation and should be quite smooth and maintain contact with the disc. Now, a reversal of the previous nightmare from hell, and that is that the can centerpiece has to be pressed down here on this part of the lid, and then we'll add the oil and then put the outer lid in place on the can. Okay, with the help of about 9 C-clamps, 2 cans of spinach, and a whole lot of cussing, I got the can back in position on the inner lid. We'll find out if I did or not when the oil leaks out, or not. Now it's time to put in the oil and install the outer lid. Okay, I put in what I think is an appropriate amount of that rare Alaskan Yukon oil, and it looks like the disc is remaining lubricated, so I think we can apply that outer lid and then see how this beast sounds. Listen to the background music in this old monster movie. Sounds just like the Super Organ Tone. Okay, it's all back together. Let's turn it on. Now with the read-write heads back 180 degrees, rotated and in proper position, the effect, it works great. But we have that beating sound in the background, sort of like a tremolo beat. And I think it's because looking back at some of the videos I made of the interior, it looks to me like the disc has been installed on that shaft incorrectly, and there is runout in the disc that is causing this noise. So now it has to be completely taken apart again, and I'll try to install the disc properly on the shaft and make sure the shaft has no runout. Looking in at the disc as it spins, and if you look at the reflections in the disc, you can see there's irregularities in its rotation. I think that's creating a vibration in here and a sort of an eccentric spin here that instead of moving directly into the heads, it's actually a lateral motion, and that's what's making our beat. Let's disassemble it and see if we can't figure out why that disc is not spinning true. Now this is really strange. I'm running the motor without the O-ring driving the disc. Listen to the sound it's making. To me it sounds exactly like that thumping that we're hearing through the unit. I wonder why the motor would be making noises like this. Okay, I'm not real thrilled with the way the disc is secured to that center axle. There's all sorts of eccentricity there. The washer's off center. It looks like there's rubber between the nut and the disc, which I don't believe is correct. So I guess there's no way around it. This thing will have to be disassembled and then try to install the disc properly on the axle. You can see a little bit of lateral runout in that disc. Now by removing the 4 screws in these positions, this upper piece of metal with the disc and the heads will be able to pull away, exposing the disc and the nut that's holding it in place. Now we can get a close-up look at how the disc is being held on this central axle, and I can't believe that a factory would install it in such a sloppy manner. This had to, maybe somebody replaced the disc and then stuck rubber in here. It's just not right. You can tell by looking, that's just not precision machine work. So let's remove the nut and all of this garbage and see if we can't mount this disc properly on the axle. All right, taking care not to touch or harm the disc, I removed the nut, lock washer, and then this very unsightly trio here of two improperly sized washers and a piece of rubber. Okay, now the disc, I'm going to have to spin it and check its runout, but it is pretty well secured to another disc at the rear. That just may be from like dried oil or something like that. I'm going to see if I can liberate the disc from this rear thicker disc. Fortunately, the disc came loose from this support back here, and I'm able to unscrew the disc and remove it. I see all kinds of crud back here that was between this flat plate and the back of the disc that might be contributing to the runout. Once I get the disc out and get it very carefully cleaned, then I can clean this, and we'll see if we can't get a better junction here that yields less runout. As you can see, there's a bunch of crud here on the back of the disc. You know darn well it can't lay completely flat with all that between it and its mating surface. You know, when I make observations about flaws in devices like this, I never know which one is the one causing the problem, but I can tell you that something I do notice here is that while there is no vertical deflection possible here in the shaft, I can sure get some horizontal motion. Now maybe that knock, 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 knock back and forth, just like if you have a bad rod bearing in a car, you're going to get a knocking. And if that could come through those heads and be amplified to give us this tremolo beat, because I think you can hear that. That is the motion back and forth of the shaft through the bushing laterally. That may be what we're hearing. Okay, I have a theory. I think at some time in the past, because this thing was thumping, someone took it apart and they picked up on that worn bushing. So they added a piece of metal right here, you can see the outline of where it was, to push against the disc and try to absorb that lateral motion. They also put a brass kind of a subspring in here that had a pilot hole to attempt to hold the tip of the shaft stationary and eliminate that lateral play. Just a guess, but apparently it didn't work because you heard it. So we're going to have to figure out something else. I think the idea of the pilot out here is a good idea, but I don't think it's adequate because, watch this, it really doesn't stop that shaft from making its lateral motion. Perhaps if there were a better designed brace out here that would center that shaft and not allow it to drift laterally. I'm going to remove this and try to come up with some idea that will hold the tip really tight and in place without applying too much friction to the rotation. I notice here too they used a stack of washers to space that add-on pilot, the brass piece right here with the hole in it. that doesn't seem right. I would think that these springs should be down tight against the surface of this metal, not spaced away. All right, here's that support piece removed so you can see it up close. I tend to think that originally there were no washers and the spring steel piece was flush out here and pushed down on the shaft to make sure that it stayed in that position. Okay, then the brass pilot was added, and it looks to me like it's worn laterally, which would be in the same orientation as the wobble. Okay, like I said, I think this is a pretty good idea, but I think it can be done better. Okay, the face of the support disc and the rear of the anodized disc have been cleaned and made completely flat so that they can go back together without any chances of wobble. Alright, now I've installed the disc flush against that rear support disc with the proper size washer, lock washer, and nut. And it seems to have virtually eliminated the runout. Next, we'll install this crossbar with the slightly changed center support here that should eliminate the lateral wobbling of the axle. All right, 3 changes have been made. Number 1, this head has been moved from this position where it was originally down to here, which is, I believe, the standard position for the head in this unit. Number 2, I changed the shape of the spring that is pressing down here on the end of the shaft. The brass arm was just too weak to maintain the position of the tip and not let any runout occur, so I bent down the blued spring to the end of it here so that it has decent pressure against the shaft and will not allow any kind of lateral play. And number 3, the disc is now attached without this hideous mess, and instead just a proper washer and lock washer. Here I'm using a dial indicator to verify that there is no runout in the wheel. You can see the needle is stationary throughout the rotation of the disc. And a little extra touch, I lubricated the bushings. There's one on either side of the armature of the motor and one on either side of the shaft out here, just to ensure smooth operation. Now let's plug it in and see if we've achieved that. Well, other than the faint whine from the motor, seems to me like things are way better. I think the runout on the disc has been reduced dramatically. I'm not hearing any thumping. It just seems smooth as glass to me. So let's put it all together for the 3rd time and see if we finally achieved our goal here. Alright, let's see how the Super Organ Tone sounds with a signal input from the signal generator ranging from around 100 to 1,000 cycles per second. Let's turn on the signal generator. As you can see, it's not real exciting. Now, let's listen as I change the tone. To me, it sounds just like those old science fiction movies. We noticed that on the first one of these that I worked on several videos ago. Really a terrific kind of special effect. Now let's plug a guitar in and strum a few chords. Okay, first let's listen to the guitar without the organ tone effect on. We're going to be going through the device, but this will strictly be the dry signal. Okay, now the organ tone level is turned way up. Okay, that's at the bass setting. Let's go to treble. Bass sort of tends to distort in this device, and you're kind of better off really with sticking with the treble. Let's play a few chords now and see what type of sound. Okay, now we're back to the bass setting. Now we're back to treble. Ollie and Jack are all spooked out by those outer space noises and just vanished on me. So I guess we won't have any tunes by them, and I doubt that they know any songs that'd be really appropriate for this device. Well, that's about it for this Super Organ Tone restoration. It actually took me probably 4 days and at least 4 different complete disassemblies to get this thing to sound like it does now. And it is not perfect. There's still a beat in the background, sort of like a tremolo, that you can hear when there's no other sound coming through the unit. Now, I tried every trick in the book to get rid of that sound, and I think it's on the disc. I think there are scratches on the disc. Remember, there was almost no oil in the unit when I got it, and I bet it's been running dry. So, and maybe in time the disc will polish up and those sounds will subside. Regardless, I still think it's a very impressive special effect. If you want to do an outer space movie or play a guitar that sounds like an organ, I guess this is what you need right here. Okay, so I just wanted to extend my gratitude, as always, to my Patreon patrons and PayPal contributors for keeping us on the air and advertising free. If any of you would like to join them, please check the links in the video description. Now, I hope you'll stay tuned for a special feature here at the end of the video, and that I'll see you again in the near future. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Well, today's task will be to sand down and antique the finish here on the 32 Ford grille shell so that it matches the rest of the car. Step one will be to remove the 4 bolts on the side that go to the braces and these 2 steady bolts here. Once we've done that, this will come loose. Then we set up the perfect environment for precision sanding. Lots of coarse and fine sandpaper, stool, the Cool Whip container full of water, and the radiator shell. Let's get started. Why, you ask, do I not use a paint stripper or the bead blaster cabinet? Because sandpaper is the best way to get this sort of mottled, old look. After I've rusted the bare areas here, this is going to look just like the body of the car, or at least closer to it. Okay, so now I'm going to do the right side, top, the left side. I think I'm going to leave this area in here black because I don't want it visible through the radiator fins. Alright, here's the end result. Looking like some piece of derelict metal that you'd find on an antique store wall. Next, we're going to have to make it rust. Step one is to apply a very uneven brush coat of gun blue to the surface of that bare metal. And as you can see, it creates all kinds of oxidation and weird patterns on the surface that look old. Now this is instant, okay? I applied it maybe 2 minutes ago. Okay, so this isn't some lengthy process. Next, I go over the surface lightly with a Bernzomatic torch, and pay attention if you have any bare spots or light spots that you want to darken. You can just sort of linger there with the torch and the metal will darken because the heat will accelerate the chemical process. Okay. Then, after washing and drying the grille shell, I'm using a glaze that I got from Hobby Lobby. It's a dark brown, and I'm applying it with, like dabbing it on with a towel so that you get uneven splotches of the brown contrasting with the black. And up here it hasn't quite dried yet. This was an area that where the metal was showing through, and once this dries, you want it a little bit lumpy with a little bit of texture, and it's going to dry and look just like this. Okay, and that is going to blend in pretty darn well with the surface of the car itself. Now, when I just set the shell in place, you can see that it's agreeing nicely with the headlights and with the overall appearance of the surface of the body. Okay, now the glaze is not permanent. It will probably wear off over time, but by that time the surface will have rusted a bit so that instead of glaze we have a genuine sort of surface rust on the metal that will make it all the more realistic. What do you think? Well, there's the finished product, completely installed and ready to go. Like I said, I think it looks in place now, a whole lot more than it did with the semi-gloss primer. So that's the end of this project. Time to move on to the next one.